I'd like to start with you, Murray, because, of course, before the film, it was a play, and you were in the play. Could you talk a little bit about how the play came about?
Well, I suppose because of the time, 58 was the stage play. Shelagh Delaney, at 19, writing her first play, a Manchester girl. And of course, Joan Littlewood and the Theatre Workshop had been based in Manchester. And they had just done a production of Brendan Behan's The Quare Fellow, which got a great deal of notice. And it was Shelagh then sending the play to Joan, because that seemed the right place to send it, because she thought it would be somebody who would understand. And indeed, Joan did understand and heard this wonderful music of this dialogue, and so put it on very quickly. It was, at the time, of course, sensational. I remember before the first night, we rehearsed, as was often Joan's way, we rehearsed right up to the audience coming in the theatre. And Jerry Raffles, who was the manager of the theatre at Stratford, as we were walking off stage to rush back to our dressing rooms to get changed, taking the original part was that Rita played was created by an actress called Frances Tucker, taking us both aside and saying, "Now listen, you two, if at the curtain call there's trouble, just split, and I'll bring the safety curtain in." And we both went, "Oh, thanks, Jerry." Like this. And so, yes, it was extraordinary. And even today, I'm sure the reason Rita and I have talked about this, here we are all these years later. And it is because it's the story. And it's still pertinent today, I always think. I'm sure if an artistic director received the script today, I always say they'd pass it on to social services.
So, Rita, tell us how you got the part in the film.
I was working backstage in Rep in Liverpool, and playing small roles like the back legs of a horse and things like that. And I read in a newspaper they were looking for an unknown Tony Richardson's company to play the role of Joe in A Taste of Honey. So I wrote to them, and they wrote back, and so I went to London and I met them, and I did an improvisation for Tony and also something from the script, and then I was called back again, and then I did more improvisation, then a screen test with Murray, and then I went back to Liverpool, and then a phone call came, and it was Tony Richardson, and he said, "You've got the part." And I and we start in 8 weeks. And I said, "Oh, thank you." I said, and I put the phone down, and I thought, did he say, "You've got the part," or "You haven't got the part"? You know, that sort of thing of the excitement. But when I got home, my mum said, "You've got it, you've got it." So.
I gathered that he had originally some Hollywood backers who wanted a very different actress for the role.
And yes, they wanted Audrey Hepburn.
That would have been interesting.
It'd been different.
Indeed.
It's true.
The year passed before it was actually
Yes,
made.
it took a year.
Yes.
And I played a few
Things
more
were
maids.
very difficult. Things were very difficult for independent kind of productions of that kind. At the time, it was virtually impossible. And Tony had to wait another year before he could actually get it off the ground, because the money people wouldn't advance the money for an all-location film, which is what Tony had in mind. And eventually, the only way it could go ahead was because the film Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, which Woodfall also produced a year earlier, or 2 years earlier, was such a huge success that by cross-collateralizing, oh, I got it out. I can never say that word. Anyway, by doing that, they could guarantee the money people that they weren't going to lose anything. So that's when we got the go-ahead, or that's when they got to go ahead. And I wasn't actually Tony's first choice of cameraman. There was a cameraman called Freddie Francis, who had been chosen to do it when it was ready a year earlier. But by the time they got the money, he was busy, and I got the job.
Rita, when you got the part, there was quite a lot of press about this unknown suddenly becoming a star.
Yeah.
And some of the press were not particularly complimentary about your
Not
appearance.
at all.
As an
really.
18-year-old, was it not upsetting for you to read
no,
those things?
not at all, because I thought, well, they said they're ugly, unknown, blah-de-blah. And I used to look at people and think, I think I'm just as good looking as them, kind of thing. And I didn't. I mean, if the things that they wrote, they'd be sued, wouldn't they? Well, I'd have to go to a psychiatrist or something. But no, they did. But you don't believe it. The fact that I got the role was the main thing, and I was able to do it. The opportunity was tremendous, and you can't. That's just as they say in Liverpool, it's fish paper, isn't it? You know.
That's right. So you got this part, your starring role in a film. So were you expecting a glamorous experience of...
I don't know what I was expecting. I just enjoyed the whole experience from the day one. I realised I suddenly felt I'd come home, because I love film. I'm passionate about film. I love being on the set. And I remember seeing Walter and looking and thinking, is there a cloud coming? Is there this? I loved all the excitement, and the whole thing was like an adrenaline rush in a sense, and it still is to this day. It was just a great experience working with Tony, and of course with Murray, who really helped me a lot, and Dora Bryan and Robert Stevens and Paul Danko. It was a very tight cast, wasn't it? Really, we worked very well together.
And actually, I have...
Very friendly atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I think you've said it at some point, Rita, that Tony Richardson also cast his crew as much as
Yeah.
his actors.
Yeah.
Is that
He
something
did,
you...
and it was very generous too to a lot of the people that work with him. He gave opportunities to direct or to be, a cameraman and things like that.
And as director of photography, Walter, was that an advantage for you that it was a tight
Oh yes,
team?
absolutely. Well, I'd worked with Tony on a small documentary called Mama Don't Allow, which was part of Free Cinema a few years earlier. So we knew each other, and I did a couple of tests with him and things like that. But making the transition to features was difficult, because a whole new area, which was fairly tightly controlled by things like Pinewood Studios. You know, they had a fairly tight grip on things, and to do something independent of them wasn't easy. So, as I said, it only became possible because of the great success of Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, which was not an all-location film. Taste of Honey was the first all-location film made in Britain for any major kind of production. And they were very reluctant. The money people were very reluctant. They said, you go up there to Manchester, wherever, and you say you want rainy weather, but when you actually get there, you'll find that you'll be sitting there waiting for the sun to shine, and we'll be paying the bill. And Tony said, no, we want to make it in rainy weather. And they said, oh, yeah, well, you may say that now, but when you get up there, you may well find it. So they were very, very reluctant, and it was only by ensuring the possible losses against the profits of Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, the whole thing suddenly became possible.
So what was Richardson like to work for as a director, from an actor's point of
Very
view?
nice.
How did you find him?
Oh, he was all right.
As directors go?
Yes.
Oh, well, I mean, without Tony Richardson, I would never have been in film, so I
No.
thought he was fantastic.
Very
and
much
he
his
was great
baby.
for me. I adored him.
And Murray, for you, and obviously you've done it on the stage, and suddenly you were outdoors, you know, how did you bring the character?
In the freezing cold. And I might remind Walter, on top of the Derbyshire moors, surrounded by a flock of sheep, waiting for that sun to come out.
Right.
God.
And
Well,
freezing,
but
yeah.
Joe, because I created the part, I'd played it for a year. I knew that boy so well that he could stick me in the middle of a flock of sheep, or in that prenatal clinic with those Manchester girls all glaring at me. And I knew how that boy would respond.
And
Yes.
I gather you improvised that scene, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Was there much improvisation generally? Or?
Well,
Well,
yes.
there was, yes, but a lot of laughter, wasn't there?
Yes.
I
We
imagine
found it very difficult to keep a straight face, didn't we? That was we sent home. Desmond Davis, the operator, was very angry with us one day. I remember.
It wasn't very tightly scripted in that respect. There was room for.
Yeah, there was.
There
Yes.
was a lot of room for it. Above all, the thing that I remember most is that there was an extremely friendly atmosphere, and then an atmosphere of liberalization from the yoke of the studio system, which was very intense. You know, at that time, the studios and the people who worked for the studios had a very, very tight control on things, and they frowned severely on anybody trying to do it differently, because they said, we're the British film industry, we're the greatest technicians in the world, and we'll tell you how things are done. You're not going to tell us, you know, and you had to kind of adapt to that, and at times you had to actively fight it, because it wasn't true in the first place. They were very good, but they had no reason to be that arrogant about it.
Rita, the part of Joe was a gift, really, because there were very few roles, particularly for women, young women at that time, as good as that. How did you feel playing the part? How
Well, it's a wonderful story, and it is a gift of a role. And I was very lucky to be asked to play it, really, because then it led to other things for me. But as Murray was saying, suddenly you were playing interesting, women were interesting, young women, rather than being a sort of caricature of something. You really, you know, you had the real people, which Shelagh sort of brought to the script.
And of course, you know, most of the British New Wave films feature male characters, very macho male characters. And one critic referred to Shelagh Delaney as an angry young ma'am, I think, too. But very few films, very few films really focused on strong women as well. I mean, in most of the other films, they were virgins or whores almost. But I mean, she was
aren't they all?
She was her own person.
No, but it's true. And then suddenly, that started a whole sort of, it opened up so many opportunities for people, and especially people from, as Murray said, you know, working class actors, because the roles weren't there. They were there, but they weren't given to us.
Yes. And of course, your role, Murray, as well, as a homosexual character, there were quite a few critics compared your performance to Victim, which came out about the same time, very positively, and said, well, actually, this portrayal is much more genuine than...
I remember after Honey, I was filming for Lewis Gilbert on a film called HMS Defiant, though I think sometimes it's called something of the Damned now. Thank you. In which the lovely Dirk Bogarde was in. And it was BAFTA, I think, that we were up for. Rita, you won the BAFTA award, weren't you? And in that, Dirk was up for Victim, and I was up for... And I remember during the evening Dirk saying to me, you did more for the cause in one scene than the whole of bloody Victim put together.